Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
Good, what do you know?
English breakfast, trim milk, and a sweetener.
Ah, amazing. Were they like you were seeing April?
I am wanting to take the information to the people.
Okay.
And I feel like with the industry right now is in the middle of some changes. So
Yeah.
I was keen to talk to you a little bit more about that because
There's been so many different changes to what mortgage brokers could call ourselves. So to start with, we were called mortgage brokers, and then there was a legislation change that said, well, you're not broking because you're not actually holding clients' money as an intermediary. So you're not you're not mortgage brokers, now you're mortgage advisors. And then they changed a couple of years ago to be like, well, now you're registered financial advisors, specialising in mortgages. And then there were still people like authorised financial advisors. And then on March the 15th, they scrapped all of it. And so now it is that people are financial advisors. And then we have specialist streams. So for example, I'm a financial advisor specialising in lending, and I have done the applicable papers that allow me to be a lender. So it means all financial advisors are supposed to have done something that is called core, which means that we all have the same grounding and basis of good financial advice and solutions. And then we specialise in different areas, and you have to have experience, and you have to have done papers and past assignments and shown that you can operate in that area and give advice in it.
Yeah, but what was happening that brought about this new changes in regulation? Was there something that was happening in the industries, or was it just they just woke up and like, actually we want to make this more clear?
It's usually Big Brother, Australia. We tend to follow Australia's regulations and changes, then we kind of watch to see what's happening over there, and then we tend to adopt.
So basically dodgy people in Australia.
Totally. In Australia, I mean, we were playing with such a small pool compared to what Australia do in terms of advisors and lenders, and honestly they found, and it's always, the few bad eggs, but they found insurance policies being written for dead people, and advisors have to belong to a financial authority provider, I do believe is what it is. The acronym is FAT, which is clearly terrible. And this is in no way, any shape or form individualized financial advice for anyone.
Good disclaimer.
The banks are so incredibly different that in the housing crisis, why mortgage advisors are good is they can help people to pivot and dance through the bank policy. I call it like a game of snakes and ladders. So you've got some housing types that some banks will lend on and some banks won't. Some banks will do 12-month approvals on, some banks won't. Some will require a registered valuation for $1,000 a pop.
Still going straight?
Yes, and some banks won't.
I wasn't even aware of that. So I guess the banks will only tell the customer what they do, which is not necessarily wrong, but it doesn't apply to all banks necessarily.
Absolutely not, and that's actually why I left working for a bank, because I was getting really frustrated, and I started to educate myself on the other options that were out there. And I know my mum always wanted me to go back and stay, she thought that banking was very safe. She's an emergency nurse.
Yeah.
And I said to her it would be the equivalent of me having all of the drugs at my disposal and giving people Panadol when they're in pain.
That's a good analogy.
Because you just can't, but you don't know what you don't know. So already, it's the funny thing that I hear when people say is that all banks are the same. What all banks have...
That's a common misconception, isn't it?
Totally. What all banks have is, okay, not that next, left, the one after.
Okay.
All banks have is a requirement to be a responsible lender. So to be not putting people in more debt than they can handle. And so that's one of the reasons why we ask for every bank statement that somebody has, and pay slips and proof of income, and we stress test people's ability to repay their lending at a higher interest rate. Yeah. We make sure that we're not running the lending to somebody's 80. We don't take 100% of people's rental incomes into consideration. There's a whole lot of safety nets that that the banks have to build in and we have to build in to ensure someone's being kept safe, and that is across the board. How they choose to implement that is up to the banks. They just have to have robust, reasoning behind what they do.
Yeah.
And then LVRs, in terms of loan value ratios.
Oh, yeah.
That is a requirement across all banks to do. Don't worry about doing a UE here.
It's not happening.
It's not happening.
Yeah,
Go up and then next week.
So what would you say are some of the common misconceptions that people get about mortgage brokers? Because I mean, the bank ones is already one that I didn't even know that the differences between the banks can be that big or that vast.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is that people have to pay. You don't have to pay to use a mortgage advisor. The banks will pay
Or
for the
you
work.
shouldn't pay.
You shouldn't pay. The banks will, especially the main banks, will pay the mortgage advisor on your behalf. However, there is always, if you do end up having to pay the broker for advisor, financial advisor, for any reason,
Yeah.
then they have to tell you that up front. So a second tier might need it, a bridge might need it. Any sort of situation where the mortgage advisor isn't going to get paid for the work, that might be where they charge a fee straight up. The party line is that banks and brokers should be getting the same deals if you walk into a bank or you talk to an advisor. I would say one of the things I do always try and do with a client is if I think that their main bank is going to approve them, then absolutely I will look to put an application in there. And I'm also not going to look to run 5 different banks' applications. It's going to waste the bank's time. It's going to give someone too many credit checks. Here's my house. Let me grab them.
Be my content strategist.
Pardon?
I should hire you to be my content strategist. We could probably say is the future of, what do you reckon is the future of the mortgage broking industry and even just lending on houses in New Zealand or in Christchurch? I know a lot of people have got many different opinions about it, but yeah, curious to hear what your thoughts are.
The banks have been trying to create robots for years
Yeah.
that can deal with lending applications, and everything turns out to be non-standard. I think people are always going to want to talk to someone who can talk them through and answer questions that they have and individualize things for them instead of just running it through, because hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of lending is a big deal. And it's really important that that's done well.
And
So
I
that's
guess it
pretty
sounds
cool.
like mortgage brokers, if anything, are probably going to have a bigger role to play in helping people to get to that first home. And helping
Absolutely.
them to get that deal that makes sense and is sustainable for them.
Massively, and also for the people who are thinking of the second home, that's really when you want to be talking to a mortgage advisor.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who can help you structure it to help you, because there's so many changes so frequently that you want to be protected from that, and you want to be future proofed, and you want someone who's looking. I mean, the beautiful thing about my role is that my only job is to the client. Like, I've got responsibilities to banks to, absolutely not hide information or do anything that puts them into disrepute, but really my job is to get clients the best deal for the best interest rate and the best structure and with the best bank. So it's not just one box that we're playing with. We don't have to care about the profit of a bank or how much money the person's making when the house is being sold or anything like that. Our job is just to help the person who needs the money.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. Well, I'm hoping whoever's been watching this today has learned something new about mortgage broking. And wow, it was really hard to focus. Just what are their names?
This one here is a Polo,
Polo.
and that one's Atlas, and
Polo and Atlas.
they're quite chunky. Quite
Polo
chunky boys.
and Atlas. Well, thank you very much for your time, April. I will link to all your details and become somewhere in the description of the video.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun, and thank you for not making me sing. I wasn't sure if that was going to happen, and I don't sound good.
That's take number 2.